Right, fabulous. So we are recording. So to everybody watching this, welcome to ATCM's Blueprint for Resilience series. We're going to be having a bit of a panel discussion around how society is changing and understanding the implications for high streets and town centres and many of the facets that actually go along beside this. There are so many knock-on implications for this. So we've got a great panel with us today to discuss more of the issues, which will be a concern for ATCM's members across the UK and Ireland. So let's introduce you all. Chris, do you want to go first? You want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Chris Wade. I'm from People and Places. I'm also an advisory council member at ATCM and a fellow of the Institute of Place Management.
Fabulous. And Mel, do you want to go next?
I'm Melanie Palmer. I'm the Chief Exec of Solihull Bid. I'm also the Bids representative on the West Midlands Combined Authority Business Advisory Group and also Chair of Bid Central in the West Midlands.
Brilliant. And Eric, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's Eric O'Brien and I'm from Waterford in Ireland. I am Chair of Purple Flag in Waterford and also CEO of a transport company called Rapid Travel Limited, which would be one of the largest taxi companies in the southeast of Ireland. Okay.
Fabulous. And Eric, just for the benefit of guys in the UK, Waterford, the original Irish city, is that right?
That's it. Right down the southeast.
Wow. Well, brilliant. Well, honoured you can join us. So I'm OJ MacDonald. I'm the CEO of ATCM. And right, let's kick off. So we know that COVID-19 is having a big impact. I think we can all agree on people. And I think just to start off, this issue of fear, surely fear is the thing that is going to dominate changing consumer patterns. So it's the first thing I just wanted to throw out to the group. How do you think fear is going to change things in terms of the way people engage with town centres? What are your thoughts on
that? Maybe if I just chip in, I've been kind of struck by this whole area of human behavioural science and kind of been doing a look at that. And I fear has an important part to play, but kind of reading behind it, I think fear has to be accompanied by knowledge. And if you just throw fear at people, the scientific evidence, not just me making it up, is that if fear isn't accompanied with knowledge, then that's when you get resentment, distrust. And there's a risk, possibly, looking at some of the data for the UK compared to other countries, and it would be good to have an Irish perspective, is that we may have overdone the fear. In that 2/3 of people, saying, for example, even if pubs opened, they wouldn't go in one. So fear has a place, but it has to come with knowledge.
That's I think that's really interesting. So yeah, you go, Mel.
I was just going to say a slightly sort of counter point on that. Fear has then created a much more focused view for the nation on trust. So I think whereas companies before COVID were already potentially, having a weaker area of people trusting people out there in business and in retail and things like that, I think the fear, if you turn that on its head, it seems like from the survey that people, rather than being scared of returning to the town centres, are returning to the town centres and businesses they trust. So I think that it will be really good for the smaller areas that show that they're well managed and that they're going to create this safe environment. They will actually sort of almost benefit in a way of people's initial fears, because they'll feel like they can trust what they know. They can trust their local, so these things I think are almost in parallel in a sort of weird universe that we find ourselves in.
That's a really interesting perspective. Actually, I've not actually thought of the issue of so much. I think that's a very useful perspective. Eric, what do you think on the issue of fear?
Yeah, but even just about the trust there, like that is going to become so important when retail does open again. It's those retailers that we trust and those that have our health and safety at the forefront will be the ones that will be there in a year, 2 years, 3 years times. It's the retail brands and the retail shops in our local town centres that we trust will be the ones that we'll turn to, and I'll say that'll be for the long term. As regards the fear part, it's going to be very interesting because it's hitting people on very different levels. It's like human psychology, right? Something that frightens me and I'm fearful of could be something different for you. So we'll have a sector in society that will not come out, they will not shop, they will not go back into the town centres for a long time yet. And then we'll have the flip side, we'll have a lot of people that the fear doesn't mean that much to them and they will embrace it sort of straight away and they will be the ones that will come back in. So we'll have to gain that trust to get those that are more fearful back in.
Another really good point, and I think it's something we need to take a closer look at, isn't it? And I think from very early on, when this disease emerged in China, there was almost this split, wasn't there, in terms of the demographics, with COVID-19 clearly having a more dramatic impact on an older part of society. And so then, do you think we'll start to see that as we emerge from this lockdown, there will be a lot of people who might be classed as vulnerable, who might be older in terms of population, that just will not engage in the economy as the same way they were doing towards the beginning of the year? Is that a factor we're likely to see?
I think so, definitely. Here in Ireland, the advice at the start was that older people should cocoon, right? Basically, stay at home, don't come out. But then they had to turn around and say that was only advisory. We didn't mean for you to stay at home. We didn't mean for you to not go outside. A lot of people over the age of 70 haven't left their houses in 6 weeks. From yesterday, they've been told now you can go exercise up to 5 kilometers. There's I don't know, a large fear was put on older people because of those measures at the start. But even you find it with young kids, like I have kids, if I bring my kids to the shop now, the look I get sometimes because, oh, stand away, there's children there, like stay away from the children. I might get some of the children.
Yeah.
Like there's this perception that the children are the carriers that was brought out at the start because they can't get it. Oh, they must be the carriers. They must be the ones passing this on. So it's a different type of fear again than when you look at the children that are out there.
Yeah. That's a really good point. That's a really good point, because one of the things we've always wanted to work on is bringing more young people into town centres so they can engage with it. But actually, thinking about that, I noticed fairly early on in terms of this debate, one of the places which people were fearful of the most, which they wanted to shut as quickly as possible, was schools and places of education, because young people do naturally tend to spread viruses, spread the diseases from a fairly young age. However, it's interesting. I think one of the things which we get told of by health experts is that because the impact on young people is so limited from this disease, and because they don't always develop the symptoms some of us might do, like coughs, sneezing, they don't actually spread it as much as you would think. I think, Chris, does this point to your first comment in terms of understanding the health and the science behind this, and making sure people are then well informed so they know what they should be trusting and what they shouldn't be trusting?
I think absolutely, and I think in some senses, and kind of managing the message and building trust, we've had it. I won't say easy, but we've had it very clear cut. And then I was looking, Eric, you kindly shared the kind of Irish roadmap.
That's right, yeah.
And I've had a look at the Spanish roadmap, and they're complicated. And the goalposts are moving every 2 weeks. And so managing messages and making positive messages is going to be really important. young people are going to be the first people that are, because they're young, never mind the fact that they're more resistant, they're going to want to be out there. And if we're not careful, social media is going to be full of young people doing that terrible thing of socializing with each other, and with a very negative vein. So one of the things I read about, which I kind of quite like the analogy, is we need to inoculate the population against fake news.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's kind of predicting young people will socialize. It will happen. But if social media is full of pictures of people stretching the rules, that's going to give a real misconception. So we need to kind of get ahead and say, yes, this is going to happen, but these are the counter arguments, so that kind of wider stakeholders can come back with the counter and they can stay solid in their thinking. And then we're also going to, publicize those dull photos of young people sat 6 around a table, socializing, distancing with the rest of people, wait a service. Keep reinforcing those positive amongst people and their peers, really. But yeah, inoculate against the fake news.
Inoculate against the fake news. Yeah, it's a really, really important term, I think. I mean, it's absolutely right to say I've had discussions with various people in different parts of the industry, including civil servants, and it feels to me like while the comms has been simple up to this point, it's the next phase where it gets really difficult, because as people push to get the economy restarted again and you start to open up certain types of businesses, we still have to, it looks like we will still need to continue to practice physical distancing. So how do you allow people to start going back to work but not have too many people rushing out the door? So in our public spaces, in our high streets, you don't have so many people that you can't observe physical distancing. On our transatlantic webinar a couple of days ago, one of the things Gail from Sligo said is that when you have what is a fairly historic town centre, you will have narrow streets. There's only so much capacity for everyone. There's a challenge there. There's a challenge there, isn't there? Mel, can I bring you in? What do you think about the issue of communications when it comes to lifting of restrictions?
I think that's massive, because huge point moving into the new normal. If we wind it back slightly to when we first went into lockdown, we set up a COVID information hub on our website, and we took that as the homepage. So within 2 weeks, we had an increase in over 28,000 visitors to that site, of people, what I would describe almost as clamoring for information. What is going on? I need to be informed. I need to know the truth. I need to find a site that's telling me what's going on. And I want somebody to cut through and filter through the fake news, as you talked about. So I think, as long as social media wise and website wise, authorities in town centres and places where people are planning to re-emerge and businesses are planning to reopen, I think as long as that information is clear and is accurate and is almost, take all the wordiness out of it. That's what we've done. We've made it really plain English speak so that people can understand what you're talking about, and then people can see the truth of what's actually happening, in centres. I don't think you can actually create a 100% social distanced town centre. You'll never achieve that. But all the work that's going on now in the recovery plans, going into the pre-recovery plans, is that, it's one-way traffic. So a shopping centre may open one door, and you can walk in that way, but you can't walk back out that way. You can only go out the other exit. There would be barriers. There would be social distancing graphics on the floor. Everywhere you go, you're not meant to sit next to somebody, because there'd be a graphic sticker saying, "Do not sit here." I think it's incredibly complex, but I think it's doable. But I don't think you'd be crazy to think that you can actually achieve a completely socially distanced, town centre or centre that's busy before COVID. But it will form like that, and that will almost start to become the new norm, I think.
Yeah, it could well be. I think until there's a permanent solution like a vaccine, that could well be the new norm. I think just thinking of some of the implications. So I'm just going to see if I can bring in one slide to show you, because I think the bit about people being fearful of coming back into town centres is absolutely right. So this is for the UK specifically. I know some people would have seen this already, but it is just worth highlighting the breakdowns in terms of people, how comfortable they feel in engaging with certain types of businesses, the extent to which they will trust certain types of businesses, and their fear of transmission. It's interesting, isn't it? It makes for quite scary reading. I mean, when you think about a lot of these businesses were on the margins of things anyway, if you're talking about large sections of society no longer using these businesses for even just a short-term period, when they reopen, that becomes a difficult market, doesn't it?
It does.
It's going to be detrimental to a lot of businesses. It's actually funny that you look at the beauty and nail salons are 32, and then you have hairdressers, barbers at 48. It's kind of the same proximity kind of going on there. So I think it's people more concerned about their hair than their nails and everything else. But yeah, it's going to be very, very hard for these businesses. Even like the cost of operating, the extra cost of creating that health and safety environment and creating that trust. Even those extra costs that they wouldn't have been able to manage before all this, having such extra costs put on their business. Now you're getting extra costs and less customers, so it's going to be very tough.
That is going to be massive. And I think actually, Eric, one for you, because thinking of one of the implications of fear, just before we finish on the topic of fear specifically, what do you think from a transport perspective? Because at the moment, I look outside my the window of my study, and I see empty streets. I see kids on skateboards learning how to ride bikes, playing football in the roads, and I get this feeling that people are enjoying sort of less traffic on the roads. But also, I see evidence that actually once the restrictions are lifted, because we are likely to have massive problems in public transport, because there will be people fearful about using public transport, that actually we will probably see huge growth in people wanting to be in a car, wanting to be in private transportation. And I just want to bring in another couple of slides I've been looking at. Some really important information, I think. So if I can move this down. So for Ireland, this comes from the Apple mobility reports. And as you see, from when lockdown started, you see that there's been huge drops in all forms of transportation. But actually that purple line is the one that has dropped the most. So in Ireland, we've seen a 64% drop in driving, 65% drop in walking, but an 83% drop in the use of public transport. And in the UK, it's something similar. So 55% drop in driving, 56% drop in walking, but it's an 81% drop in public transport. Is there a case to say that we will have issues with public transportation when we return?
I think definitely, and I think it's going to be, for a lot of people, public transportation, you have no option. So it's going to be which public transportation they're going to use. Will the bus be safer? Will the taxi be safer? Will tube rail be safer? And then it comes back to that trust issue. So it's whoever can build that trust and present themselves in the healthiest and the safest manner to transport passengers, they'll be the ones that will come out on top first. Like from our own perspectives, like we've had to install screens in our taxis, we've had to put hand sanitization in taxis, we've had our COVID plan in place since I think it was the 10th of March. We wrote ours about a week before the country started locking down. So you have to sort of build that trust straight away. We have an executive side of the transport, and that's stopped completely because the airlines have stopped. So I can't see that side of our business coming back for about 6 months, because I can see a lot of companies saying no international travel for really the international corporations. They'll be told to go on Zoom, go on, do what you've been doing for the last 6 months. We're going to cut your travel expenses. There you go. That's what you're doing. So that side of our business is practically gone. At the moment, with public transport between cities, there's obviously limitations on how far you can travel. So that's gone. It's going to be, in the next 2-3 months, it's going to be very interesting to see what transport people choose. So it's
It is going to be really interesting. And again, it's something which came up in our transatlantic webinar the other day. Chris, what do you think?
Well, no, I think Eric's point, and we keep saying it, it's about information and trust. And whatever business you are, I'm choosing which supermarket I shop at on how they're handling. Let's not call it social distancing. You've made the point several times. Physical distancing, although I live in Cambridge, and there are some people that seem to think that eye contact has to be avoided. But that physical distancing, no, there are screens between the self checkouts. There are one-way systems. There's monitoring, outside. I think that element of trust. Talking to friends in Madrid, where people have just come out of 7 weeks of very strict lockdown. The cab companies are communicating with them very clearly. We're back in business, hand sanitizers, screens, all the things that Eric, and that's like, oh, okay, that they're already, pitching to be the first port of call, really. So building that trust, I think has been said, we're not going to eliminate risk. But I went to one of my local towns that, on 21st of March, the market was open. People disregard by 1/3 of the population to physical distancing, 1/3 not there, and 1/3 taking precautions. I went back 6 weeks later and completely closed down. Nothing, no market, nobody. And we want that balance, don't we? Where we're going to introduce physical distancing measures, reasonable controls, and we're vastly reducing the risk from what it was 6 weeks ago when people really weren't alert to it. But it's introducing that, as I say, when the goalposts are changing every 2 weeks. It's a much more complicated story now. But yeah, the people that can demonstrate they've massively reduced the risk and explain how they've massively reduced it but cannot get rid of it, that I think elements of the population are going to be itching to use them if they're reassured.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. That's a fair point. I think, Mel, I'm going to come to you for the next question now. So sort of moving away from the issue of fear and actually looking how it's changing people as business owners, how people are having to respond to this crisis in innovative ways to make sure that they can continue to earn a living. I think is there a case to say that some businesses have been really innovative, much more open to embracing change? I think we heard from our first debate where we talked a lot about how the political situation's been changing. We heard about how a lot of local authorities, MPs, were really open and engaged and happy to talk about how things need to change quickly in the face of a crisis. Is that the same for businesses, do you feel?
I think it is, because it's important to note that those businesses that now are making sense of the COVID world, if you will, are going to be the ones that are currently planning out the other side. They're the ones that are going to re-emerge successfully and be able to continue along an upward path. And I think it's those people that are proving now to their customers, that are doing all of the community style things, giving away the free stuff, the "we're here for you" message, the trust again, you know, coming back to all of that. It's those companies that the customers and consumers will remember. So that will really, really impact their future. I think there's loads of examples of business across the country. They've changed and modified and adapted. My favourite, which got thrown out, just a lighter note, was the pub that turned into a fruit and veg shop, but you could have a pint whilst you waited. So he became so busy that it had to be shut down. But there you go. But I do think that those businesses that have transferred from restaurants that have transferred to takeaway, local pubs that are known for being the place to go by me, you know, they have suddenly turned everything on a sixpence and become a delivery or you know, order and collect at the door. So businesses that have adapted like that will move forward with the tide. But I think those that have just shut down, maybe some of the bigger organisations that are used to like vertical drinking and food isn't the big issue, shut down, I think they will find the transition moving back into the post-COVID world quite difficult. Offices, just as a quick note, I think people will always work differently. We've changed forever. I think the home working and the way that people do remote working, that's changed everything forever. And I don't ever foresee that all of the businesses, the offices, will all go back and sit behind their desks. I think there will be lots of changes there. And that does put a threat into the size and office units in the towns.
I think that's an interesting point, and I do note that here in the UK, actually, right now, there is a lot of back and forth on that specific issue on working practices, on how we use things like office space. And ultimately, the truth is that there are lots of tasks you can do in an office, which you can now, in a modern age, actually do from home. So you ask the question, is it necessary for lots of people to be in an office together? That's absolutely right. I think, Eric, how do you feel, or what have you seen in Waterford in terms of how businesses have adapted to this new reality?
Again, it's like that. It's the smaller business will come out better, I think, because the smaller business, a lot of them have sat down, they've adapted, it's easier for a smaller business to change their way of doing things a lot of times than a large multinational that has a fast food chain, something like that. They've just all shut down. Whereas the local guy, he's the guy that's doing the home deliveries. He's the guy that's looking after people at a time that they'll always remember when they were looked after. You look after your customers now, they'll never forget, because this is unprecedented. So, like, it's the smaller companies, I think, that have gone that extra mile. It's those little wins and big wins for the community and for those people that that'll always be remembered.
That sounds like an important point. And do you think that's partly because of their size, which allows them to react quicker? Do you think it's partly about the fact that they are more embedded in their community, and so they know better how to respond properly?
Yeah, and they know their community better.
Yeah,
like it's you're on the ground, you're in the middle of it all, you know your customer, you know your community. It's sort of easier to make those changes when it's one person or two people making a change. Whereas if you have to get a board together, you have to get them onto online, they're all working from home, you have to get them, try and come up with a decision between them, then you have to get the logistics of that decisions put in place. Whereas if it's just one or two people that own a business that have to put those procedures in place, it can be easier for it to be managed. Okay, it's more daunting for that business owner. As I sent somebody like last week, I'm going to get nothing by sitting home watching Netflix all day. It's if it's this is the time for me to do my work. This is the time for me to push my business. This is the time for me to make those changes. And like, and I'm not going to get that sitting on my rear end at home.
Certainly.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think, Chris, coming on to you, I think one of the things I want to ask, I just want to broaden this discussion a little bit in terms of and think about startup. Now, you know that in the last physical meeting we had of the advisory council in December, which feels so long ago now, so long ago, one of the things we discussed was some of the big challenges for our industry going forward. And one of those 3 points was the social revolution taking place because of new technology.
Yep.
Do you think, and I'm going to again just bring in an extra slide just to see this, do you think, almost in a way sort of Simon Pickeefley has been talking about, that we're seeing almost an acceleration of different entrepreneurs because people have been forced to think differently about how they engage with their customers? And I think primarily of the success of Joe Wicks, the body coach channel, which has just gone absolutely huge since people have been trapped in lockdown and have needed a bit of light relief and a bit of exercise. And just entrepreneurs like him who are completely maximizing the tools available through social media to reach an audience globally while in lockdown. Do you think people are starting to feel differently about how they approach developing a business?
Yeah, how are the workouts going, OJ?
I tried one. I gave up after 15 minutes, honestly. I'm not doing it again.
No, I think what's interesting, we were doing some work across 12 neighbouring towns last year, and one of the things we were asking both to the businesses and then the customers are use of online engagement, not necessarily online trading, but online engagement with businesses. And the businesses at that time were coming back saying it's not really that important, and the customers were saying, yes, it is. Now, I think there's an awakening amongst some of the businesses, not all of the businesses, to say we've got to go through a period where we need to communicate online or on phone, some of them, but we need to communicate with our businesses. And so I think that will be a legacy. And I think what we need to get right is that that's a legacy that will migrate during this transition to still the kind of click and collect model, so that people will be coming into town in the future, or may even now progressively be coming into town to pick up some items, so that we avoid that queuing, so that you can get some key items on a click and collect basis from the door. I know I clicked and collect my fish and chips the other night, which was a new experience, but it worked. But that people are still, got the habit of coming into town, and that we may have more appetite for that type of approach going forward. That's certainly when we've been talking to groups of towns, a lot more interested in that than there was previously.
And Mel, what do you think about the social revolution? I'm just trying to get to summer school last year.
Pardon?
Did you make it to?
What did you say, OJ?
Did you make it to summer school last year?
I certainly did, and won the award. Thank you.
Oh, of course. Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
I was there. Yeah, I did. Yeah, and talking about, I mean, the societal impact on social media, and it was fantastic to watch the Google presentation, wasn't it? And about our tolerance and what we'll actually watch on a digital clip and things like that. But I've got absolute concrete evidence now, because instead of shutting our bid down and not doing our events and festivals, for instance, for VE Day, that's a really good example. We've taken it all digitally. We've involved all of our businesses, asking people to make for peace. See what I did there? So people are creating these pieces of artwork at home, and then to symbolise the rejoining when we meet again. It's about the second. But things like that, our businesses and society in Solihull have really got behind. And they're constantly seeing this of communication and local communication and how they can get involved. And people have been sending in some marvellous pieces on what they're doing in their own community. But I think that whole thing evidences for me a kind of kingdom, is what I like to think. And so I think businesses that can again show this sort of kindness, CSR, giving back through social, you know, they're the ones that really are going to be ahead of the game, because it's become really important to everybody, and something I've strongly believed in beforehand, but now I think it's really given us that opportunity to use it as a platform.
So what we're saying is the methods of communication and engagement might shift, trends might accelerate during this crisis, but at the end of it all, it is about levels of trust, and it is about supporting your community, which continues to endure whatever channel you use. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and if you look at it as well, this is going to become one of the
so.
positives out of all this. It'll be one of the big positives when we come back. These are new markers that businesses have achieved. These are new ways of selling that businesses have done, and like this is going to be the new part of the new life that we're going to live, and these are the new markers that these businesses have. So this is additional trading for them.
I also,
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, go ahead, Mel.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I also think a really important part is about the government has already partnership with private companies with the whole PPE and lots of things like that involving private companies. And I do think that that's another positive where I think public and private sector should start to forge together a much closer working partnership, which can only be a benefit to everybody.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I think they're all really great comments. I think just one thing else I wanted to touch on as well is how people as consumers themselves are changing how the types of things they consume has changed, how they engage with businesses. And I know, and this, what I'm about to show you now, I think is fairly consistent across different industries. But we hear things like Disney Plus and Netflix starting to smash records in terms of level of subscriptions, and online shopping being at an all-time high for fairly understandable reasons. Have we just seen a huge acceleration of some of those shifts in terms of people embracing online technology?
Definitely. We actually own a sports company online as well. And in the last 6 weeks, we've seen a 230% growth of our online sales. The amount of new customers that we've got has been phenomenal. The amount of customers that we've got that never knew we were there has just been shocking how well we've done out of it. And this crisis brought about that. It's funny, like with Facebook and stuff like that, that has promoted our online presence, promoted that kind of way of thinking. People have pushed us towards us. So I think it's getting very, very interesting how the online world and how people's way of shopping has completely changed.
And Chris, to what extent do you think these trends, this growth in people embracing online, will stick once restrictions have been lifted? Do you think some of these trends are now here to stay, or will people go back to how they were shopping before?
I think as soon as the cinema opens, I'll be there. But I think going back to what was covered at the summer school, actually this is highlighted in many ways some trends that were already there. And so it's not a question of going back, it's a question of, in some of the towns that I'm working in, opening up to customers that were already keen to engage in this way. A younger generation of customers, a working generation of customers that aren't available in the town centres all the time. So I think actually it's kind of been a little bit of a reawakening on that, in terms of some of these issues were there already. Yes, they're very exaggerated, but we needed a prod to think differently, and this has been more than a prod, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting the thing you say about cinemas. So this has actually been mentioned by somebody from the cinema industry already, who we spoke to during a High Streets Task Force meeting. And it's clear that I think when cinemas reopen, people will head back. And the reason is there's a certain experience that comes with using a cinema that doesn't come with watching Disney Plus or Netflix at home. And I think, is it fair to say that almost that trend that we have been talking about for years, that thing around experience, that will endure if there are experiences to be enjoyed in town centres, then you can't really replicate that from the comfort of your own home. And while retail may change, experience will probably not, and people will want to be there. They'll want to consume it live. Do you think that's fair to say, Chris?
Well, I think so, but in all of this, we need to be very careful of not thinking personally. And also, lots of people are reading, whether it's environmental trends, whether it's independent business trends, whether it's local shop trends. People are cherry picking bits of the story to suit their own narrative. The truth is, we don't really know, do we? Some of the figures you put in about people's nervousness, we need to track how that changes. I think there is some ONS data is saying that people's nerves and fear is decreasing, but we don't really know. And I think we've got a period of transition, which is essentially at least the rest of this year, where there's going to be some nervousness, some anxiety. My instinct is that a lot of things will go back to the emphasis on the social, because that's what people are missing. But we have to watch the data and watch the information, because at the moment that's telling us slightly different things.
Yeah, I think that's right. And yeah, go on, Mel.
Sorry, I was just going to say on that point, whilst we were saying on one side about the increase in social media, technology and skill sets there will grow massively, which I think they will, I do think every survey that we've done, I'm just looking at our survey for Solihull Town Centre, and interestingly, you've got the usual question that you know the answer to. Yes, the majority of people have missed going to the pub and the restaurant. But then the second one down, or the third one down, is I just want to browse. I want to browse. I'm not looking for that specific item, because I can buy that online. But they still want to come and browse and be there and experience that experience of being in a shopping. You realise to live without, or is that just my experience? But you know, it's really, really important to remember that they're reinforcing this message of we want to come back, we want to come back safely.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to get that retail experience. I think it's all about that experience when our town centres do open up again, that it's to get that retail experience and that experience of being in the town centre, city centre, and making it as positive as possible. Because if it is, people do want to get back in, but if they do go back in and it's a case of I'm queuing outside a shop for half an hour, I feel guilty for browsing in a shop because there's a queue outside and I have to distance myself from everybody in the shop. That experience diminishes. So it's very important that we have experiences around that retail that bring us back in and keep us in and get us coming back in again, because this is going to be the experience that we're going to have for the next year or so.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That's a really good point. guys, I think we're coming to the end of our allotted time. I think this has been a great debate. Thank you so much for doing this. Mel, especially you at such short notice. Like for the other two,
You're welcome.
this, but Mel sort of said this morning, she would have got the email this morning. She said, yeah, count me in. So Mel, you've been brilliant.
Making the word of next year's summer school too.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, Chris, you're all fabulous. I'll get the notes written up and we will build this into some of our sort of resilience planning, which our members can share. So guys, thank you very much. I hope you have a good rest of the week, and hopefully I'll speak to you all soon.
Thank you.
Great comparing, OJ.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, cheers, Mel. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.